If I was blind, tell me how would you finish this line?
The early light of the morning peeked through the half-open burgundy curtains of the dimly lit hotel room. The sound of news intro music blaring from a small flat-screen television on the far right wall echoed as Angela, 34, wild flowing hair, slipped in and out of consciousness. In other news, there seemed to be a rash of rolling blackouts experienced throughout various parts of South America from Argentina to Uruguay. Millions are without power as each government launches their investigation into what exactly affected their power grids. In other parts of the world, there is a growing concern for the escalated tensions between the United States, Iran, China, and Russia over accusations of electronic and election tampering. Tensions have also heated up over oil tankers and trade control near the Strait of Hormuz. Each country accuses the other of placing their special interests over the stability of the region, while growing social instability protests threaten to tear apart each nation. Riots are breaking out all over North America and Europe regarding social injustice, wage difference, the cost of oil, and the rising cost of living, said the newswoman with a red suit, short dark hair. Angela's eyes fluttered as she woke out of her sleep. Midnight. As the low light, soft colored room slowly came into focus, she raised her hands to her eyes and rubbed them. She felt the heavy weight of someone's arm about her small waist. She looked down and followed the line of the strong male's arm until she saw a face to match. It was John. He looked soft in the face and even more boyishly handsome, with the soft brown stubble shadowing his strong chin. "Jeez, how much did I have to drink?" she said, whispering to herself. Angela sat up slowly and gently slid his arm from around her waist. She looked around the room and saw an empty bottle of Jose Cuervo and a few tipped-over shot glasses laying about the floor. She looked back towards John and slid quietly from the bed. She tiptoed around the room, searching for her clothes and other items. She found her bra hanging from a nearby day chair and her underwear laying near the edge of the bed. "Great, Angela. Just sleep with the man you just met," she said, berating herself as she searched for her blouse in the dim light. Then the soft sound of a male's voice chuckled. "Do you always beat yourself up the next morning after sex?" he said as he lifted himself up by the elbows. Angela glared at him. "I don't always go home with men I just met. So yes, I'm beating myself up," she said, slipping her underwear back on. "Have you seen my pants?" she said, searching the floor with her eyes. John smiled. "It may help if you turn on the lights," he said as he flicked the lamp light on. Angela squinted for a moment. "Well, I was trying not to wake you," she said, half smiling. "You mean you were trying to sneak away?" he said, chuckling again. "Was I so terrible last night that you'd sneak off without a word?" He laughed again, teasing her. She bit her bottom lip and laughed. Then she rubbed her face. "No, not terrible. Truthfully, I don't remember much," she said, slightly embarrassed. "Well, I remember a lot. You sure are wild. I've never seen anyone go toe-to-toe with me with tequila," he said as he stood up. Angela's face flushed red as her eyes followed the line of soft skin and defined muscles that made up the physique of John. He was built like a Greek god, a body perfectly crafted for the perfect goddess. His morning shadow exuded sexiness. If lust had a body, it would be him. Angela's face blushed red again as her eyes involuntarily aligned with the length, width, and weight of John's triangle. She couldn't believe that she took all of that last night. Tequila is one hell of a drink, she thought. That was all she could think. John watched her watch him, and he smiled even wider. "I could easily help you remember what we did last night," he said as he slowly walked over to her. His thumb grazed the full weight of her bottom lip as he bent in to kiss her. His lips were as soft and comforting as they appeared. Angela lost herself in his kiss. She didn't know what came over her. Before she knew it, he had somehow disarmed her of her underwear again as they tumbled toward the bed. He flung her brow to the floor as they rolled into a fiery ball of lust and wanting. After a while, they both fell back, exhausted and breathing heavily in each other's arms. I swear, I have never done this before. I don't know what has gotten into me, she said as she laid in his arms, thinking about only what they had just done again. You're not going to try to run away again, are you? I hope not. I like what we did last night and what we did just now, he said, looking into her eyes as he raised her chin and took her mouth into the hot heat of his. Then Angela came back to her senses. What time is it? She asked. He reached over toward the nightstand to get his phone. It's 11 a.m., he said as he watched Angela sit up straight away. That late? She said as she got up and looked for her clothes again. Yeah, I guess you're going to check on what that guy told you in South America now, huh? He said as he sat up and slipped his pants back on. Angela stopped in her tracks and slowly turned around. She felt the blood slowly drain from her face. How do you know about that? She said as she faced him. Her heart began to pound, not knowing if she had inadvertently slept with the enemy. John looked up slightly surprised by the question. You told me last night when we went to the other bar to dance, he said as he slid his white t-shirt on. You don't remember? You really shouldn't do tequila, he said with a chuckle. You told me that you're a reporter and you're following a story about the New Haven program or something like that. Then you asked me if I'd show you the entrance I used to get into the underground entrance by Castle Rock. I said I'd show you on the map if you promised not to forget about me and at least keep in touch, he said, grinning. But you don't remember any of that, I guess, he said, grinning at her again. His southern accent turned her insides out with butterflies. He was charming and smooth, and even when he was playfully reprimanding her, she smirked. No, I think I'll stay away from that from here on out, she said as she teased him. Will you still show me? She asked as her body relaxed. He nodded. But you promised me that you won't try to go into that place. You can tell those fellows aren't playing any games. I don't want you to get hurt or come up missing if it is as bad as you suspect, he said with a creased concern now lining his brows. Angela smiled. I promise, she said. John nodded and pulled a paper map from the top drawer of the nightstand. He spread it out onto the bed. If you go up here, down this country road, the entrance is to the right. You'll know that you're near it because there is a white house only a few clicks from that place. There aren't many people that live down this road, so very few people know about this entrance, he said as he circled the area on the map. It doesn't show on the map that anything is there, but it is. Just be careful and promise me that you will not try to enter that place. That place gives me the creeps, he said as he stared directly into Angela's eyes. Their eyes locked for a space of time. His concern for her in just the few hours that they spent together touched her deeper than she was willing to admit. Her heart squeezed around that concern. She wondered how he had come to care so deeply for her in such a short amount of time, and how their momentary fling had reciprocated just the same. She didn't believe in love at first sight, like all of the brainwashing childhood stories had convinced most little girls. But she did believe in the laws of attraction. She was definitely attracted to him in more ways than physical. She quickly waved the idea away. Her career did not leave much room for attraction, and breaking the story could mean the lives of God knows how many people in that place. She couldn't afford to be distracted. She had a job to do. John saw Angela's eyebrows crease. He could see her struggling with her thoughts, so he leaned in and kissed her forehead until the furrow of her eyebrows relaxed. Then he kissed his way down to her lips. I know you have to go, but please don't forget about me, he said, taking her mouth again. Both their hearts fluttered, and their breaths stammered as they tangled each other's tongue around the other in heated passion and burning lust. I won't, she said as she stilled her raging hormones. Angela broke herself from his embrace, found her coat, and walked to the door. John stood there, looking back at her. She opened the door slowly and then stopped. She turned around and walked back toward him. "Give me your phone," she said. He smiled, handed her his phone. She took it, opened the contacts application, and programmed her name, phone number, and address into his phone. "Now we won't lose touch," she said as she kissed him on the lips and handed him back his phone. He grinned. She walked out and closed the door behind her with purpose and determination in long strides toward her car. She sat down in the car, unfolded the map, and took a long glance at it. She folded it back and placed it on the passenger seat. She breathed out slowly, turned the key in the ignition. "Okay, Angela, time to work," she said, smirking as she put the car in drive and drove out of the hotel parking lot, back toward the long country road toward the underground complex. Order. 6 p.m., Laurel and Tate Prestige Bank, New York, New York. Up on the 22nd floor of the Tate building, the soft sound of a computer keyboard's clicks echoed amongst the small, dimly lit executive offices. In the corner office, Patrick Bandicourt, 33, slim, perfectly cropped brown hair, worked tirelessly on the last bit of financial paperwork for a huge corporate merger account. He had noticed that the two companies' main investment focuses had increased in corn and soy. He had also noticed that one of his Asian clients were buying up companies that produced massive amounts of pork products. He had also noticed that many of his clients were rapidly buying up stock futures in companies that harvested water, food, and fuel products. The part that concerned him more was the increase in arms investments. The numbers he crunched worried him, but he dared not mention that to John or August, who seemed preoccupied with cornering the petroleum market. The numbers these guys were investing in and who they were investing in would alarm anyone. Patrick rubbed his eyes as he finished up his last entry. He stepped away from his desk and stepped toward his corner office view and looked out into the city. Little lights twinkled here and there as the highway lit up in a brilliant light show of fast-moving cars. He rubbed his eyes again. The conversation between the board and the last meeting still left a fragment of fear beneath his chest. In his heart, he knew what they were planning was horrible and heartless, but he was in it thick now. He had seen how they play, and they didn't play fair. If they could do this to millions, what more would they do to him, an inconsequential new partner? It would be his word over theirs. If he blew the whistle, no one would be able to keep him safe. In the few months he had been welcomed into the fold, he had seen them plot and blackmail senators and lawmakers into doing their bidding. They guilt them with their sins of extortion, taking bribes, extramarital affairs, making known others' pornography addictions, secret babies, etc. There was no amount of dirty play they wouldn't go to. He had learned that the best thing he could do was play along and warn those close to him when they decided to crash the market. It was only a matter of time. They'd tell him when to get his stuff out. The whole world would collapse, but he would be safe because he was chosen to know these things. There was an order to the world. He had learned that much. He stepped away from the window and looked over the newspaper with the market numbers. He stared at the paper closely and quickly picked up his cell phone. "Hey Diane, I know it's late, but I need you to dump some investments and reinvest them somewhere else. I'm going to email you the information. Just make sure that you do what I said, okay? Thanks," he said, hanging up the phone and placing the newspaper on the desk. He grabbed his jacket and turned the main light off. He walked out as the soft desk lamp shined on the article headline, "Mexico agrees to send troops to border to combat the influx of immigrants seeking asylum at U.S. border. Concerns grow over increased global tension." 7:30 p.m., Central Intelligence Agency, Langley, Virginia. A black suit-wearing intern ran into the office of Jerry Haskell, 63, slumped over a pile of documents, rubbing his eyes. "Sir, there were some talks of chatter being reported from one of our intelligence bases in South America." Jerry looked up from his desk, snapped his fingers for the intern to step closer with the folder in his hand. Jerry grabbed it, flipped through the pages, and looked up. "How sure are they of this threat?" Jerry said as he stood up. They seem confident that the threat is real, but they have no exact location as to where the attack will happen. They are sure that the threat is imminent. This is as much as they were able to gather before the interception went silent. The intern said as he followed Jerry into the command room. If they went silent, it means the plan has been put into motion, and the cells have received their orders. Notify everyone we can. Tell them to increase the security threat level. I want all port cities and borders to be made aware. I don't want another 9/11 on my watch, he said, looking at the digital world map on the Halo monitor. His face set hard, and the frown lines in his forehead deepened. Things have been too quiet lately. It bothers me, Jerry said, looking at the electronic world map. Quiet, sir? The intern questioned with a puzzled expression. Yes, considering we have a leader bent on pissing everyone off, including our allies, yes, quiet. Something's not quite right, but I can't put my finger on it, Jerry said as he rubbed his face again and looked up at the intern with a dark thought shadowing his face. Yes, quiet. It's almost scary how quiet the lines have been. It's like I can feel something bad coming. I don't know. Jerry shook his head and leaned against his desk. I can't really explain it, but I know I'm right. This whole situation, I know I'm right. I'm afraid of what will happen if I am, Jerry said as his eyes locked with the intern. 8 p.m., White House, 1600 Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. Susan Bordeaux, 26, pecked away at her keyboard as she polished off yet another letter of intent to Senator Coleridge, requesting to speak in person. Susan looked up from time to time to sneak peeks at President Draven pacing back and forth in the Oval Office. Occasionally he sat down and made a few calls to this one and that one. He bent over his desk and looked at a number of papers. His face reddened more than normal. She noticed that he'd been rubbing his forehead again. She watched him lean back, loosen his tie, and look up at the ceiling. He breathed out, allowing his mind a space to empty and clear. Susan watched him for a moment. Her concentration instantly broke when her telephone rang. She clicked the switch, then picked up the line. Please connect me to the president, the thick Russian voice said. May I ask who is requesting to speak with the president? She replied. Please tell him Mr. Polanski Novoshorin is calling. He is expecting me, the man said. Hold, please. Susan quickly put the man with the thick foreign accent on hold. Susan clicked the switch and looked over at President Draven from her desk. As soon as his phone rang, he sat up quickly. He looked up at Susan from the Oval Office. And Mr. Polanski is on line 2. He says you are expecting him, Susan said. Draven's face changed from red to a side of pale white she had never seen. He stood up straight away and walked quickly to the door and shut it. She watched the switch turn red, which let her know that he had picked up the line. She normally would have never switched over to hear what was being talked about. The sight of Draven's fear scared her. She quietly picked up the line and listened in on the call. Curio, I told you to never call me on this line, Draven said, flustered and aggravated. You forget yourself, Draven. Be calm. Everything is set in motion. Be prepared, Curio said. How soon? Days? Months? Draven said as he paced the office. Soon, Curio said. Suddenly the line fell silent. Draven looked at the phone and tapped the switch a few times. Hello? 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 He said, screaming into the phone. He pulled at his red tie violently and screamed out, What did I do? Oh God, forgive me, he said as he rubbed his face hard and plopped down in his chair. Susan's face paled as she slowly placed the phone back onto its cradle. She looked up at the closed Oval Office doors and heard Draven lamenting on the other side. She swallowed hard. The sound of the doorknob turning drove her into an internal panic. The door opened and a red-faced, scruffy-haired Draven stepped out. Hey, Susan, I'm going to turn in early tonight. You can go home now, Draven said as he slowly walked down the hall. She had never seen him so out of place or unkempt. He always made sure that his hair was perfectly combed over, but now it was in a spiral array and his tie was completely unraveled, lying lazily about his neck. She quickly packed up her things and walked down the hall. 10:30 p.m., Castle Rock, Old Country Road. Angela pulled her car over on a dark, long road with trees and fields on either side. She had drove through a small town a few miles back with a single white gas station. She pulled out the map John gave her and focused on the name of the road he circled in red. What John told her quickly flashed in her mind for a moment. It may look like nothing could possibly be down that road, but it's there. Dim your light when you get past a little white house on the right, she repeated to herself. Old Country Road, she whispered. She folded the map again and placed it onto the passenger seat. She drove on as John had said. A few houses dotted the road here and there. She maybe saw a house every 2 miles. Her headlights finally fell on a little white house on the road. She slowed down and pulled over near it. She recalled the story of Lloyd and the Safe Haven program. The house was the perfect description of what he had described in his story. The old white country house with a brick trim chimney and a broken white fence gate. She was confused because Lloyd had described this happening to him somewhere on the other side of the country. She got out and brought her phone with her. She inspected the outside of the house. On the far side of the house, a window had been broken in. She flipped the flashlight of her phone on and took pictures of the outside of the house and the broken window. The window was still slightly raised up, as if it was just enough room for someone to pull themselves up by the windowsill and slide through. Angela considered climbing through the open window, but thought twice. If they slid through the first time, why would they slide back out the same way? Maybe they walked right out the front door, she thought. She walked back around to the front of the house. She quietly stepped onto the porch, put her hand on the knob and cautiously turned it. The doorknob turned and the door opened with an eerie creak. Hello? She said as she stepped into the house. She turned her flashlight toward the walls, floors, and even toward the ceiling. The house was fairly empty. There was old furniture and bookshelves covered in dust. Her guess was that the home had not been lived in for a long time. Maybe the house was bought by the same group running the underground facility. It was a perfect cover to keep the prying eyes of the public away from what they were doing there. John was right. It was the perfect cover, she thought. A pile of clothes caught her attention in the far corner. She put her light on it. 2 large gray work suits lie next to each other. They were the exact description of the clothing he said the work crews wore, which he had been a part of. Angela took photos of the clothing. Angela's heart raced with excitement and fear. Fear that what Lloyd had told her was real, and what John had saw was exactly as they had described. A sickening feeling began to grow in the pit of her stomach. She felt her stomach do a little flip, and then she suddenly felt sick and dizzy. She leaned against the old dresser to stabilize herself. Come on, Angela, keep it together. You gotta get this story, she said to herself. She steadied her feet and headed for the front door when she heard a crunch. She turned her flashlight toward the floor and lifted her feet. The instrument used to gain Lloyd's freedom were laying in pieces on the floor. She knelt down and took pictures. She stood up and headed back toward the front door again. She stood out on the porch and slowly breathed in the cool night air. She closed her eyes for a moment and then looked up into the night sky. She ran back toward her car. She looked down the road into the night and drove on. She kept her headlights off just in case she was close to the facility. She wondered if they truly had tower guards like Lloyd had described. She drove slowly until she saw the beginning of a large black fence with razor wire facing in, not out. She saw another dirt road off to the left and eased her car in. She exited her vehicle and darted across the road toward the fence. She saw lights whirling off in the distance, so she ducked down. She bent down and looked for a place in the fence where wire ties would be. Lloyd said they used them so the guards wouldn't be able to see where they had exited the fence during their escape. She felt with her fingertips along the fence until she hit a pattern inconsistent with the fence. She pulled her phone out and turned on the flash, but covered the light with her hand. She faced it toward the area of the fence and saw the black wire ties holding together the base of the fence. Had she not felt for it, she would have never seen it with her eyes. It could have been easily overlooked. She took a quick picture of it. She then heard the roar of an engine far off in the distance. She quickly turned the flashlight off and darted back across the road. She slid into her car and pulled the car far enough into the dirt road that no one would see her car parked there in the darkness. She ducked back a bit and grabbed her infrared video camera from the back seat. She figured she'd need it with her on the trip. She turned it on. Then she heard the sound of a siren ignite the air. She jumped a bit and saw the lights of the very large building a little distance from the fence light up like a Roman candle. A vehicle's loud engine roared closer. She faced her camera in the opposite direction and saw a large white bus marked New Haven roar by. She saw the hopeless faces of people staring out the bus windows. Angela's heart pounded in her chest. She jumped out of the car and closed the door quietly. She took a photo of the large lit building with her phone. She quickly tucked the phone into her back pocket and followed the road along the trees in a sprint. She finally found a spot that gave her a perfect view of the entrance. The bus had been sitting at the gate for at least 5 minutes, while at least 20 heavily armed guards came running out of every orifice of this massive building. She began recording what she saw. One guard was checking his manifest with the driver standing on the outside. Another guard had entered the bus and was flashing his flashlight at the faces of each passenger. He also was checking a manifest. The sound of the dogs came next. She saw at least 4 guards with canines run out and stand attentively near the gate. Then in a small courtyard area, she saw 5 people in white lab coats carry out chairs. Another set were pulling white tables. Then 3 more ran out with laptops and handed each of the 5 men one. Then the guard that was on the bus stepped off and walked over to the other guard that was standing by the driver. They were speaking to each other, and then the guard that checked the bus nodded his head. The other guard ushered the driver back to the bus. Then both guards turned toward the 2 men walking a steel platform above the gate and waved their arms. Then red strobe lights flashed at the top of the gates as the sound of a loud beat cut the night air. The gate slid open and the bus pulled into the courtyard and parked. Then she saw another guard run toward the bus and yell, "Everyone, please exit the bus in an orderly fashion. Please follow the white demarcation line just outside and line up, please. Thank you," he said and stepped off the bus. Passengers of all shapes, sizes, and ages stepped off, visibly shaken and scared. Once the last passenger got off, the bus's engine roared to life again and drove back toward the gate. The gate sounded again and slid open. The bus turned left and drove down the dark old country road. The sounds of cries and whining increased as the dogs barked louder. "Rest assured, this will all be over soon. We will need to process you into the program, and then you will go inside where you will receive a hot shower, fresh clothes, food, water, and a warm bed to sleep in. Thank you for your cooperation. Welcome to Safe Haven Program," a guard said through a small black bullhorn. Angela watched as the men in white coats spoke to each person as they tapped something into their computers. Another person in a white coat was taking each person's digital fingerprint on a small black handheld machine. "Please step to the right, please," they'd say. 3 other men in white suits stepped up to one of the passengers already processed at the first table, tapped something into their computer, and asked the passenger to hold out their right wrist. "This may hurt a bit," they'd say, as they held another small black machine against the passenger's wrist. After a moment, the passenger would snatch their wrist back and nurse it. "Please proceed forward," one of them said. A young girl walked forward, still nursing her wrist, and she approached another man who was holding some kind of digital bracelet. The man in the white lab coat slipped the bracelet around the girl's wrist, waited for the flashing red on the side of the bracelet to turn solid green. Then he pointed her toward the entrance of the building, guarded by more guards in full black tactical gear. The girl stumbled forward, looked around as she hugged her own arm. Tears fell from her face as she entered the building. All of a sudden, Angela heard a commotion. "Don't you guys realize what this is? I'm not going in there," a middle-aged man with graying hair and a tattered gray suit shouted as he backed away from the table. "Go in there and you die. They're tagging you like cattle. I didn't ask to be here. Did you?" he said again as he grabbed the arm of another passenger near him. "Mr. Murphy," Calm down, said one of the guys in a lab coat. You calm down and let me out of here. I am a United States citizen. You have no right to keep me detained, he said, challenging the worker. Two guards in black suits began to walk up slowly behind him. The worker's eyes widened, and he raised his hand to signal the guards to stop. They did, but their eyes steeled upon Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, we are not here to harm you. Safe Haven is a government program aimed to help you readapt to society. Once you have finished the program, they will help you reintegrate back. Please, just come back to the table, the young worker said. And I'm pretty sure that you don't believe not one word of what you just said. I've known lies all my life, and you, sir, are not a very good one. No one who plans to reintegrate anyone back into society ever tags them like cattle for the slaughter, Mr. Murphy shouted. The Nazis tried that lie once before. Do you remember that? I do. I'm from New York. You don't have the right to hold me without permission. I'm not stepping to your table. You're not tagging me. Forget about it, he said brazenly, turning to face the two guards behind him. What you're doing is illegal and unlawful. I was a lawyer for 30 years. You have one hard year and then you guys want to drag people off the street and shove them in the back of a bus and carry them off to God knows where. And you expect for them to be happy about it? He turned around so they could all hear him. I went to war to fight pieces of shit like you. Who you think you're fooling? He said, pointing to the men in white lab coats. The two guards fell upon Mr. Murphy. He tried to fight them off. He punched and kicked at them. Then another ran up and punched him in the gut hard. He doubled over and fell to the ground on his knees. He gasped for air as another guard kicked him in the face. He cried out in pain as they stomped on him. The other passengers screamed and cried as they watched on in horror. The guards didn't stop until Mr. Murphy was no longer pleading or moving. Then one of the guards pulled out his bullhorn. We only asked for your cooperation once. Please follow all instructions provided you. Contrary to Mr. Murphy's information, we have every right to keep you here until you have successfully completed the Safe Haven program. Disobedience and disruption of any kind will not be tolerated, he said as he stepped over Mr. Murphy's lifeless body. Angela held her mouth as the tears flowed down her cheeks. She kept recording the horrified faces of the other passengers and the still careless faces and eyes of the guards. She now had enough proof that Safe Haven was no haven at all. 12 midnight, Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. The caravan had finally reached the city that bordered El Paso, Texas, and the U.S. border. The city of Juarez was large, vast, and lit like any great metropolitan city. In the morning, they would come to the border and seek asylum. They had traveled such a long way. Many were tired, but managed to get by on the money and goods that they had brought along the way. They found a small field in the grassy sand to assemble their tents. Nurse Nieva Sanchez and Dr. Cynthia Silvana wore their hair pulled back in their usual way. They had each decided to stay cool in some tan capris and a t-shirt. They checked each tent's occupants to ensure that they had the necessary paperwork and identification records to petition for asylum in the United States. Cameron accompanied Cynthia as she made her rounds. He had come to appreciate the work she had been doing along the way. Each of the asylum seekers showed their appreciation in their own way. Cameron patted his stomach. If we keep going like this, I'm going to be the size of a whale, he said, teasing. She laughed. Latinos and Hispanics like to show their gratefulness in different ways, especially with food. I'm surprised that you're not used to it by now, she said, giggling. He smirked. Besides, getting here is only half the battle. It may take months before they'll get a decision, but I like to make sure that they have what they need in order to get the process started, she said as she asked another seeker in Spanish if they had all the documents that she told them that they would need. They each pulled out their papers and various pieces of identification. She looked over the papers. Gracias. Esto se bien, she said as she handed the papers back to them. So are you excited about coming back home after 3 years of living abroad? She said. Cameron smiled. I'm not sure. Living and working overseas has made me question life here. I guess I'll figure it out as long as I go along, he said, smiling, as he accepted yet another empanada. from another grateful asylum seeker, Cynthia snickered. They finally approached Miguel and his family's tent. They were sitting by a fire they made, playing music and eating. Cameron sat with them, playing music and listening to stories for a while. When he finally slid into his tent, it was 1:30 a.m. He laid there for a moment thinking about the next few hours, his mind battled in a fiery storm of indecision and cluelessness. He had not any further instructions from Mother, and Charlie had been busy the entire time. Then he heard the whisper of Charlie's voice. "Cameron, you up?" Charlie said. Cameron sat up and unzipped his tent. "Yeah, what's up?" he responded. "I need the package you made in Caracas. Mother wants me to have it," Charlie said. "Okay," he said as he packed up a small black pack in the far corner of his tent and handed it to Charlie. Charlie unzipped the top and peeked inside. "Good, thanks," he said as he began to turn and leave. "Hey, wait," Cameron said, walking toward Cameron. "Why haven't I received any new orders yet?" Cameron said, concerned. Charlie smirked. "Don't worry, new orders will come in the morning," he said. Cameron nodded as Charlie turned and walked into the darkness. Technocrat. 8:30 a.m. Good morning today. New York, New York. "Good morning, USA! We have another exciting show for you," said Alvin Gaff, 39. Broad shoulders, bald head, caramel complexion with a bright white smile. "We have techno genius Alan Creed with us, who will be talking about his recent meet with Congress and his new ID Verify idea," Gaff said, smiling. "You may also know him for his recent partnership with LA SWAT and the introduction of his swarm assault drones. He's been featured in Wired magazine and Fortune's most influential technology companies. He's toured the globe and has made appearances on TED Talks, and we're excited to see what he has coming up with next," chimed Hannah Cobb, 40, brown hair, light complexion, red hair, and fire red lipstick. Megan Lauder, 46, blonde hair, and Jana Toker, 39, hazel eyes, brunette, clapped as a tall, lanky kid with short, dark hair and a ready smile walked onto their set. Alan, 29, short cropped hair, pinstripe blazer, black and white Adidas, sits down at their asymmetrical desk with a wide grin. "So Alan, you've been very busy lately. You sat down and had dinner with the president, and now you're working with the Department of Homeland Security to create their ID verification system. Or so we've heard. Is this correct?" asked Megan. He nodded. Yes, the rumors are true. I had been sitting with a few friends one night waiting for the game to come back on. Go Pats. And this PSA came on, talking about missing or exploited children. You know the commercials, he said, turning to the others. "Yeah, I know. It's extremely heartbreaking when you get those alerts on your phone telling you yet another child has gone missing in your area," Janice said as her eyebrows turned down into sadness. "Exactly, and for me, seeing that commercial that night just really struck a chord with me, particularly that night, and I had a thought," Alan said. "What if we had a way to track people's movement? What if we created a system where no one could move about without having some sort of upgraded Real ID? It would make it harder for people to move things illegally," he said, smiling. "I mean, I had already created the mini Rayed swarm drones that minimize the human casualties when military or law enforcement enter a hostile environment. So why not create a system where people can buy and sell with their upgraded Real IDs and eliminate paper dollars? Because as long as paper dollars are around, people can still move things illegally without the money being traced or tracked. But if the system is cashless, and if everything is tied to the Real ID system, the movement of money can easily be tracked and traced for illegal activity. People would be less likely to involve themselves in illegal activity if it were so," he said, smiling. "I mean, I get what you're saying, but what about the privacy concern and the security of the system in general?" Alvin questioned. "Yeah, I mean, no one wants to experience Orville's 1984 in real life," Hannah laughed. They all laughed. "I mean, I get it. No one wants Skynet. I know," Alan laughed. "I get it, trust me. But that's not what I'm trying to do here. Think of the upgraded Real ID like you would your current ID and credit cards. That's all it is. A central place where all your stuff is stored. medical records, credit cards, driver's license, etc. But it also guarantees no one but you can use it because it is biometrically activated, meaning only you can use it as long as you live. It is RSA data protected, which is the highest level of encryption in the world and triple backed by our very own AES 456 patent encryption key, he said as the audience clapped. So what do you mean by as long as you live? Hannah said. We truly mean as long as you live. The upgraded Real ID remains active and usable as long as your specific biometric heartbeat continues. The moment you stop breathing, your will protocols begin. Will protocols are established when you apply for the upgraded Real ID. There will be a legal court authority at each DMV to have you assign what things must take place in the event of your death, including your last location, what to do with your estate, implementing all insurance policy protocols, and medical wishes, like to resuscitate or not, etc. The new ID system will be seamlessly connected to our entire system, from your banking to your medical. If your heart stops, a last known location will be sent to your listed emergency contact and to the nearest police station. If the device is tampered with, an alert and last location will also be sent. This alert will be integrated with a new upgraded camera system in all cities in the US. The systems are highly photographic at the best pixelation count to date. It is able to identify all individuals registered in the world via the International Global Cooperation Database. No one will be able to buy or sell unless they have the upgraded Real ID, he said, smiling. We are working jointly with all local and international government agencies to implement this ID system everywhere. The only reason why illegal activity continues to flourish is because they have no fear of being seen, and now we're going to turn on the lights so that no one can take a child without fear of being caught and recorded. This will ensure that if a crime is committed, that the likelihood of capturing and gaining a suitable conviction is highly probable, he said as his smile faded into a mask of cold steel. I'm tired of seeing the Amber Alerts come across my screen and only hoping that the child is found safe and not dead. It breaks my heart to see another be on the lookout come across my screen and text on my phone. If I can do nothing else but use this brain of mine to keep everyone safe, then I will do that. I'd rather do that than stand by and do nothing but hope that things will change. We have to be the change, and we have to say enough is enough, he said as his still blue eyes fell into sorrow. He frowned and then looked down at his hand. I had to do something, he said, his voice barely perceptible. The others' faces fell as their heads nodded. He then looked up and smiled wanly. The audience stood up and clapped. Well, we can definitely see that your heart is definitely in the right place. We'll just have to wait to see how this will all turn out then, Jana said. More coming up when we come back from this quick commercial break, Alvin said as their theme music queued up. Curio stood in front of the television inside of his lavish New York apartment. He grabbed the remote and clicked the television off. Come on, bring me my phone, he said, stepping away. He walked slowly over to a large window overlooking the city. Kamal, 6'4", broad chest, muscular build, all black suit, walked up and handed a small black cell phone. Curio dialed a few digits. The phone rang. Mother answered the phone in her usual deep, ominous voice. Are we in place? She said. Yes, it is a go. Very well, she said, and ended the call. Curio turned to Kamal and handed him back the phone. Bernie. Kamal nodded and left the room. End of part 6. Thanks for watching.